Let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all to this event hosted by Help Me Understand and in conjunction with the CU Mass Communication Department. And I want to let you know that there is a survey that is available through the YouTube clips page that we have. So if you would, if you get a chance to do that, we would appreciate getting some of that feedback. And maybe we'll take a look at that later on and see what responses we have. We were hoping to maybe even use that as part of our discussion. Speaking of discussion, of course, we are looking forward to the participation of the audience. And for those of you that are online, there's the chat if you want to, in the live chat, if you want to pose a question, we'll try to keep an eye on that, or in the comments section. So we want to involve as many folks as we can in this. So if you would join me in prayer. Almighty God, most holy and divine, hear our prayer. Thank you for your many blessings, and we ask you for grace and mercy in our lives. Lord Christ, have mercy on us and be here with us tonight as we endeavor to better understand our world, each other, and your will through this discussion. Give us clear minds, compassionate hearts, and cover us with the spirit of your truth. Amen. I want to start by welcoming the panel. I appreciate your acceptance of my invitations, begging and pleading, really. So I do want to introduce you. So joining me on stage is Nathaniel Hendrickson, here to my right. Nathaniel is from Casey County, Kentucky, and works as an interdisciplinary artist, painter, curator, documentary filmmaker, and freelance producer. Their work explores the edge of performance and visual art, and has worked on collaborative projects internationally and with the open program of the Work Center of Jerzy Grotowski. Also, Hyunji Park in Korea and Finland, Gianluigi Biagini in Finland and Italy, Pietro Verasa, Belgium, and Meltem Cumbul, Turkey. Hendrickson's current work focuses on the ecological crisis, human perception, and the metamorphic sublime. He's also put together the graphics that you see on the screen with us today as a way to take which one did you use? I used Wamba. Wombo? Okay. So use Wombo in using altered images and other disciplines, I guess, or other methods as well. So thank you for doing that to give us a sense of how existing artists can incorporate AI and use AI into their own work. Next, at the very end is Ray Hollenbach. Ray is assistant professor of theology. He is from Chicago, and so he's not afraid of people or things smarter than him. Is that about right? Okay. Jonathan May, in between the two, Jonathan is an associate professor of sociology, the editor for the Campbellsville Review, and the chair of the Division of Social Science. He received a bachelor's degree in theology from Oral Roberts University, a master's of sociology from Western Kentucky, and a PhD in sociology from North Carolina State. Dr. May has taught and researched widely within sociology, including work in demography, community sociology, marriage and family, and the sociology of religion. He is particularly interested in religion in contemporary society and the interaction of religion and popular culture. Please give them a hand for volunteering to be up front. My name is Dr. Thomas Jeffrey, and I am a professor of business technology here at Campbellsville University. I have a couple of opening remarks because what I want to do is sort of set the context of as we move forward. Before we begin, I'd like to take a few minutes to set the context on which we will base this discussion regarding the future of faith in the era of artificial intelligence. First, let me address artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is not a new phenomenon. In fact, abstract conceptualizations of AI go back 100 years, and development of AI as a tool began over 6 decades ago. For most of us, though, it is a somewhat recent phenomenon, and we have little comprehension of how, in a short half a century, it has progressed from a research novelty to an indispensable part of our lives. From self-driving cars to Chat GPT, it seems each day brings another news report of how this technology has taken another exponential leap in capability. I've heard and often repeat with deep sincerity that AI is not a new technology, it is a new paradigm. It's a paradigm shift of such magnitude that we can scarcely comprehend the potential it has to impact all of humanity and human enterprise. As such, we dare not be dismissive of it because we do not understand how it works. We need only know that it does work, and it works incredibly well, even at this adolescent stage of its growth. To say that artificial intelligence is a complex issue is an understatement, and to be sure, any study of it will span multiple knowledge domains. Thus, it is in the intent of this discussion to take an interdisciplinary approach that adds a layer of context to understanding the impact of AI on individuals and society. Secondly, as concerns faith, it serves to add another contextual layer by which to investigate AI. And in so doing, we will focus mainly on Christianity because most of us here share that faith tradition. However, that does not necessarily preclude our discussion from being more generally applicable to other faith traditions. Like artificial intelligence, faith is a construct that encompasses many disciplines and experiences. Unlike artificial intelligence, it is not something new, but rather something that spans the eons of human existence, not to mention eons of interpretation and variance. The nuances of faith and AI might be difficult to dissect and digest, but we shall try. We shall endeavor to persevere, as it were. The final contextual layer is that of expertise. We are not experts, not at least in AI, and I dare say that even the experts in the field of AI are inadequate to address the entirety of what this new paradigm means for mankind. As non-experts, novices really, we encourage you to step forward with us and participate in this discussion because despite our unknowingness, feelings of technological inadequacy, and perhaps helplessness in the face of inevitable progress, it is important to talk about the deeper issues this incredible technologies bring to our world. Now that the stage is set, let's begin. The first question that we have for the panel, and this is we have a couple of scripted ones. Let me rephrase that. We have a couple of pre-selected questions before we take questions from the audience. The first one that I have, and I guess we'll just start at that end so I can think a little bit before we get there, but what are your thoughts on how AI is and or will impact faith?
Dr. Jeffries, thanks for having me. Good evening, folks. How will AI impact faith? Well, I think we can be sure that it already has and that it will. I noticed a powerful tendency when social media really began to gain traction in the late aughts and on into the teens. We realized that when they started to put phones and computing together, it's an entirely new platform. And so there's the rise of the Facebook, like from when it was first out. And I noticed an interesting tendency as to how Facebook impacted faith. In this regard, there were a huge number of prayer requests that I would see pop up on Facebook from my friends. And then the list of responses were amazing. And I thought to myself, well, why is that? And of course, people were, good-heartedly sharing their life and asking for prayer. But then the number of responses that were always encouraging, infallibly, like you've got this, and I'm lifting you up, and then we added emojis to it. And I realized that sometimes when we pray, we're disappointed at the silence. The fact that our prayers don't ever seem to leave the room. And one of the aspects of social media on faith was that we finally got something that would answer us back. Pray for me. I'm going for an interview for a new job. And 36 comments later, you got this. You go, girl. I'm praying for you. And you actually felt heard. And one of the most difficult things for me about prayer is that sometimes I do not feel heard. And so I think that the use of technology with respect specifically AI on faith is that we like immediate responses. If you're a North American, you do not like to wait. And we like immediate responses. And so what I think began, at least for me, to become evident in the early stages of social media now promises even more immediate and nuanced responses. Instead of somebody just saying, you've got this, I can go right now to Chat GPT or go to Bing's chatbot, I can go to any of those and start to ask questions and actually get conversational answers back. So I think there's this deep-seated need in us to feel like we are not alone, and I think that AI is going to scratch that itch.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me here. So a couple of things that I wanted to sort of bring up, not to get too deep into sort of, sociology. I guess that's why I'm here to talk about sociology, but a couple of ideas from sociology that I find interesting with regard to AI. And one of them is Max Weber. A lot of 19th century and 20th century, early 20th century scholars argued that religion was going to decline in the modern world. Their secularization theory, we call it. And that as the world becomes more modern, that religion dies out. And many of the arguments were like, okay, so science is going to replace religion. And Peter Berger put forth the argument that when you get a bunch of religions in the same society, that nobody can look at those religions and still really have faith in their own. And so it sort of pokes holes in your faith. And but Weber had a really interesting idea. His idea was it's not so much that science is going to replace it, it's that as we move into a more rationalized, bureaucratic world, a world in which everything is governed by processes, and those processes can fix everything and can deal with everything, we quit thinking about these more transcendent ideas. They become less a part of our everyday life. And so one of the sort of negatives or dangers I kind of see with AI is this idea that what AI is sort of doing is it's sort of taking the space. I mean, part of AI is like it's mimicking human decision-making processes, right? So that sort of sense of we have a part to make the humanitarian decision, or we have the part to make the sort of the qualitative decision. And if you create, an AI, a computerized decision maker that doesn't require people to keep putting input in, you sort of, where are we in the process? Where are people with moral compasses in the process of making this, of the things the world does? Later scholars in the mid-20th century called this the irrationality of rationality, that we become so rationalized in our processes that it's irrational. And, they would use sort of, an idea like the thing that I thought of was, you go to Sam's Club and you get your chicken and you see the breast of the chicken at Sam's Club and it's that big, right? How do you get a breast that big? Well, it's because you create these farms, right? You create these chicken farms. The chicken farms are all about this, making more meat. So they've created a process, and the goal of the process is to make the most chicken meat in the most efficient way, right? For the least amount of money, time, energy, whatever, right? And no one ever thought to think of like, okay, what's the humaneness to this chicken, right? And so only in the last 20 years are we starting to ask these questions. Wait a second, is this humane to have chickens so big that they can't actually walk, right? Is that right? And so what the rationality of rationality is this idea that, wait a second, once we start making our decisions really based on efficiency, then we oftentimes the questions become, can we do something, not should we do something? And I think that really has an impact. And so I think when we start building an AI, again, AI has this potential to replace human decision making, to replace, our control of the processes. I think that's problematic. One other thing that I thought was interesting with AI, and this might, depending on your perspective, might actually be a kind of a positive for religion and for faith, is that, one of the things that I've noted is that there's been a growing skepticism in the world. And so if you look back, say, again, to the 20th century, and you talk about intellectuals, sorry, I didn't mute this, all right? If you talk to intellectuals in the 20th century or the 19th century, many of them were skeptical of religion, but very embracing of science and technology and the potential of science and technology to change the world and to fix problems. And what we see today, right, in the last 50 years is you're starting to see this increase of skepticism not just of religion, but skepticism of science, right? And I think AI has sort of added to this. When we look on the internet and we see our Facebook post and we see the news feeds and we see the media, it's like most of us have gotten to a point where we're like, I'm not sure if this is telling me the truth, right? We don't accept the news or the science or the technology or the information we're giving without some bit of skepticism, because we know that there's something on there that's programmed to sell us something, right? And so this idea to me is that there's this growing skepticism. And with regard to faith, what does that mean, right? If we're growing in our skepticism towards science and technology, it's like, does that bring faith back and going, wait, right? There's kind of this equal opportunity skepticism, right? Everybody's skeptical of everything. Maybe there's room for faith to sort of come back in, even in intellectual circles, right? And so those were some of my thoughts. One other thing that I wanted to, just one quick thing. One of the things that there's sort of a trend in religion today, that the two key trends in religion has been sort of this individualization of religion, right? Everybody sort of believes what they want to believe and takes what they want to believe out of their faith. And I wonder, because we're seeing this with, AI in mass media or AI in, social media, is there sort of a, there's an app for that. Right? Maybe there'll be an app for developing your own faith with your own rituals or things like that. I mean, when you stop and think about it, maybe that's, I don't know that maybe it's a weird thing, but it's kind of like out there, this kind of idea. Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. It's kind of this idea that, right, that people are, will AI be providing us with sort of our own, from your responses to different religious posts or religious idea, it kind of feeds you the information you want, or feeds you the rituals and the ideas and the beliefs that you want to believe, right? And so, yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on this from
Interesting.
the outset.
Nathaniel,
Great. Is this working?
is it working?
Hello, hello?
Yeah, there we go.
Sweet. That was very interesting. Both incredible, thought-provoking entry points. I guess my sort of entryway into this conversation on faith is probably more concerned with the will. Like, I'm thinking about, and it maybe kind of dovetails with your last statement about, like, this tool in our pockets, or potentially even plugged into your brain at some point, or your bloodstream, or whatever, would be that somehow, augmenting the body in such a way that then the will to act in the world is something like, then it comes into question. Like, are we actually acting under our own volition, or according to some outside influence? Or do we ever actually act according to our own volition? Thinking about, bringing back the question of the will that was pondered upon at length, right, throughout history. So, for example, a lot of contemplatives really subscribe to the idea that the will of God is actually what moves us, right, or something of that nature. And that the more you go against this higher will, right, the more tension emerges, or chaos, or maybe even some troubling results in your personal life, right? Something like to that effect, I think, is the big conversation that I'm interested in as well, because as you start augmenting your decision-making abilities, so much so that for example, you could program your entire schedule, or someone's programming it for you, essentially, telling you when to wake up, when to do this, when to do that. Then it's also a question of what is this autonomous, what is autonomy, and what is what is the driving force of humanity? Are we here simply, what is the meaning of life? It comes into the question also, right? And then what does it mean to act in the world? And then I guess the other paradigm or interesting sort of question I ponder at length with this question of art, AI, and faith is that this notion of intelligence. So the fact that sort of like the theories around the singularity are that essentially intelligence is autonomous. So we've created intelligence essentially is something that wants to expand, right? That the universe sort of started, or let's say was born in a sort of very quick and fast energy, right? And then all of this information was spread throughout, right? And then slowly it started to form more organized, like at the atomic level and subatomic level, start to become more and more entangled and organized in different ways. And that information and intelligence is this like reorganization of all of those little bits and pieces of information. And so with the question of AI, it's like, oh, now there's like, perhaps if that is something that we have created or had some part in creating, and that also comes into the question of an informed universe, then what kind of universe is that going to create, right? So then I start asking that question. because, for example, quantum computing is like the big question is that when you go beyond, for example, if you could create a computer out of, like, say, a rock or some crystals, or let's say an entire system, right, a lake, or other kinds of physical processes that already exist, then you start asking the question, okay, then what is creation? What is creation, right? Is it informed by some kind of divine providence, or is it something that can be reorganized and made more efficient or better, or potentially more to serve us as a species, right? So then, like, I'm like starting to ask that question. Or, for example, if AI essentially wants to say, well, human beings aren't really that efficient, so let's just get rid of them, right? Then there's a whole other sort of part of the question, right, about an informed universe. Well, actually, it would make more sense that we make everything like a certain shape, right? Or there's this one really funny sort of but horrifying example of AI gone crazy, which is basically this of like a paperclip factory. So you design an autonomous paperclip factory, and then the artificial intelligence decides that everything should be a paperclip, and that so that it destroys the entire planet and creates these incredible paperclip machines, and then turns all of the resources of the Earth into a paperclip and launches into space to colonize all of the universe and create paperclips. So then, so there's like,
I think that is why Elon Musk, the news article you showed me today, maybe that's Musk's reluctance to, like, he wants to tap the brakes, I think.
yeah, let's pump the brakes a
paperclip.
little, right? Because autonomy, creating autonomy with a decision machine, because I would say also, I should step back a little, that when the computer was theorized, I'm forgetting the name of the person who invented the computer or came up with the idea. Turing, I guess. Turing, yeah. So Turing had a few machines he was imagining. So one was a decision machine, which is what we have now, right, in your pocket and on your computers, and what's used by the military-industrial complex and so on. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I keep going in and out, like really close to this. Okay, better. All right. So there's two machines that Alan Turing was imagining in his thesis paper that basically led to the invention of the computer. So he had, one was a decision machine, which is what we have now, and which is used by everyone to organize their lives, or to, for example, weapon systems, etc. But he also imagined what he called an O machine, or an oracle machine. And oracle machine is what I was referring to earlier, which is like how you can organize a space according to a system that already exists, right? Like creating a computer out of a pond, or creating a computer out of an existing system. So that would be, I would think, for me, if we are to really give AI more and more thought, with this sort of care, a question of care and a question of sensitivity around maybe this humane question which you're hinging on, is that this could be potentially the frontier of AI, which would be to integrate AI with the world as it is, and with the universe as it is. So an oracle machine essentially is a machine that is designed to augment or improve existing systems and make them flourish, right?
Including the human machine.
Including
Right.
humans, but
Right.
also to create a harmony, right? To create a balance, which right now, the question is also the paradigm of exploitation versus the paradigm of sort of a fostering or of a cohabitation with nature, right?
So if I understand what you're talking about there is there's a human-driven sort of this need for efficiency, right? And that this decision machine that you're describing, that what we know most. That's what we're most familiar with, the decision
It
maker.
requires input.
And then there's this other conceptualization where AI may actually lead us into a much deeper relationship with all of creation, all that there is. And so by doing so, we might be able to leverage its already magnificent and divinely created, if you will, design of systems and processes and data storage, that sort of thing. And by leveraging that, we might actually have a better insight not only to all the universe, but including internally into ourselves.
Right.
So if I can summarize what I've heard so far, and so this is quiz time for me. We started out thinking about how these new technologies have sort of created a need in us, a need that, well, it didn't create a need, it's feeding a need. It's scratching the itch, and the more we scratch it, the more it itches, and we just want to keep going with that. Even though your example started off with a very beautiful sort of, it was a way, the Facebook was a way for us to connect and to be more dynamic and virtual in that thing that really we are as people, the social part of us. But then as it continued, it became something a little more necessary, a little more addictive, if I could use that word. And you know, if I'm understood where you were headed with that, and so AI is just a way to make that happen more efficiently, just more of it. And in fact, you don't even know if you're communicating with the person, right? And so, and then Jonathan came to the discussion talking about how AI as a social structure can help us to, in some ways, do exactly the sorts of things that we would want to do, where we are connecting with other people. But it's become, as pointed out by Ray's example, irrational. It's a rational. AI is at its core logic. It's a logical operational machine. But it's created irrationality in us, which is going to make us, or it drives us to create more irrationality. And so then when I hear Nathaniel talking, while I think he totally gets that, he also says, but maybe there's something that is beyond, maybe AI can actually help us overcome that irrationality. Maybe it can help us connect. Now, that's, I don't know how I did on my quiz, but that's pretty much, if I could sum it up. Do y'all have any, from the audience, do y'all have any questions? Is there anything that you would want some follow-up on? And then even amongst the panels, do y'all want to, is there something else that we want to discuss on the topic of just that base of faith and AI? What you got?
Professor, I think that we see two different discussions here. The first one with Brother Ray, that he's talking pretty much about the narrow use of artificial intelligence, which is pretty much present in our daily lives, and he gave us a great example how AI can be used to our lives, even to our own faith. And on the other extreme, we have something that is more like a general artificial intelligence. We are thinking about a future that is pretty much science fiction, if you will, like a movie, but nevertheless, it is a reality. It is a reality that probably is closer to us than ever before. So I think that the point here is how do we make the machine, an operational system, actually to have some ethical and moral principles to make decisions that will implement a better future for us, not only human beings, but for nature as well.
Okay, let me make sure I understand and the question, and then I'll let y'all respond. So you were talking about narrow AI, which is what we have today. It's an automation, really, of task, of processes, of efficiency. And so narrow AI, even though we can think about something like autonomous cars, the programming logic behind that tells it what to do. It's all programmed in. So that's a narrow AI. And on the other hand, so that was part of a conversation. And then the other part of the conversation sort of tended towards a general AI. And a general AI is based on, the best that I understand it, it's based on something like deep learning, that a machine can actually learn, and it doesn't need to be modeled all the time. Well, it could use a model, but it doesn't have that programmed or trained into it. It can actually, like we do, learn. And so one is very practical because we see it now. Everything around us now is a narrow AI. But then there's the idea of what, as you mentioned, the science fiction, a general AI, and beyond that, we'll talk about super intelligence maybe later. But general AI, where it can actually learn, we could get it going, if you will, but then it's going to learn. And so where do we go from there? Where's the human, whether it's the narrow or the general, where does morality come from?
Ethical principles.
The
Role will they play, if any?
the morality and the role of machines in humanity.
In terms of narrow AI, we have more control over that. But the general one, that our brother gave us a great illustration, we don't have so much control. It's pretty much a machine learning about how to do things better. And like he said, if for some reason this machine decides just to say that imago Dei, human beings are no longer
Well, I definitely get your point, or at least I think I understand your question. And so what I want to do is ask the panel this, because I think this is at the core of your question. If a machine has any morality, where does that come from? Would that be a simple way to put it? Okay. Where does morality come from? Where would a machine get morality?
So throughout human history, morality comes through revelation. Have you ever tried to make the best of your life using logic and hard work, and you only found that you messed up your life even more? So from Mount Sinai are given these 10 organizing principles. Imagine the people of Israel, after 400 years of slavery, coming to Mount Sinai, and guess what? You're now your own ethnic group. Guess what? You are now your own country. And the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God that I worship, said, let me give you as a gift 10 organizing principles. Now, what I want to say with respect to morality, Thomas, is that morality came from beyond ourselves. In other words, it came, theologically speaking, through revelation. Now, what's interesting to me about where our technology has been headed is, and by the way, I'm so grateful to the creative artists. In this case, the makers of, I think it's the Netflix series Black Mirror. Anybody seen Black Mirror? Okay. I love it because it is descriptive of the device that we currently carry. But it also tells us that the device is reflecting ourselves, and that reflection is dark. So there's a sinister. I mean, what a brilliant title. Whoever conceptualized just the phrase Black Mirror. And so what we're seeing right now with generative predictive text, the GPT, is that GPT is just simply trying to predict what it thinks, if I may use that personification, predict what it thinks we want to hear. So in other words, the morality that's currently driving AI on that interactive or social side is to give us what we want, to which it causes me to want to shudder. To
Be
give
careful
us
what
what
you
we
ask
want.
for.
There have been times where I have prayed, "Oh God, save me from the things that I want." Right?
Yeah.
And Fabio, it was kind of you to be complimentary, but of what I said. But when I said that Facebook, provides people to put their prayers out and to get feedback, the itch is being scratched that I'm done with praying to God because I can't hear from God, but I can hear from the 39 people who responded. And just to go back to that example once more, what if you sat in a room silently and said, "I have a job interview tomorrow, God, would you help me with it?" And we were silent just long enough that the voice of the Spirit could fire a synapse in our head and say, "Why do you want that job? What will it do for you?" Well, I feel like I've arrived. I feel like I'm finally enough. Or no, I just want to feed my family. But when we are producing these feedback loops, and AI, at least the GPT side, is a feedback loop par excellence. When we're generating these feedback loops, what we end up with is a black mirror. And most of those programs end up being somewhat horrific. And I'm grateful to them. So specifically to your point about morality, on the moral side, I think that our itch that wants to be scratched is that we don't have to do the hard work of sitting alone in a room silently and hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit. I think we're trying to avoid that work, and I think we're looking for immediate feedback. Now, I was intrigued with what Nathaniel said about Oracle computing, not the company, but that, is it possible that we could plumb the depths of creation itself, the vibration of electrons and protons and neutrons, and that that a lake, a system, an organic system created by God could actually do some of the work for us and speak to us. And I thought to myself, wow, I would love to know what Walden Pond would have to say to us without Thoreau mediating. I would love to know that, because it still allows the creator to be the creator. And if the technology can allow creation to speak to us, then I would want to trust that voice. Then I would want to trust that voice.
Why would you trust that voice?
I'm sorry?
Why would you trust that voice, even though it was mediated by technology?
Oh,
more than you would trust.
Because a long time ago, there were 7 days in which the Creator said, "It's good, it's good, it's good." And again, this goes back to the morality issue. God says, "Let there be light," and He wasn't talking about the sun and the moon, and He said, "Light is good." And then He said, "Let the waters separate," and now you've got an expanse between the waters. And then He said, "That's good." And then by the time He got to creation in His own image, He says, He created man in His image, male and female created He them. And He says it's very good. So the reason that I would have a bias, a default position towards listening to the lake is, besides the fact that it's poetically beautiful. I mean, thank goodness for artists. But that also that we would be unlocking the wisdom and the goodness of God that's inherent in creation. So my bias would be towards trusting that. My bias towards efficiencies, the technological imperative, they've been working. Do you know we spent, I think it was Procter & Gamble spent $500 million to come up with Pringles? And I know that seems like a total non sequitur. But it was like, okay, here's a potato, natural, and we slice it thin and we fry it, but the problem is we can't predict the shape, which makes packaging difficult and shipping difficult. And they spent $500 million in development to finally predictably have a way to create a potato chip.
Did it pay off for them?
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, it's a big success, says the business guy. Well, I mean, from a business perspective, right? And this is to your point then about efficiencies, right? We're still working on how do we create a square tomato so we can package and ship them more efficiently, right? We're working on it. And then the questions are, okay, the technological imperative, if we can do it, should we do it? And I don't know that, I think that both the theologians and the artists are far more positioned to speak to the question of should than the business world. No offense, I've already run Dr. Jeffries off. Yeah, I said the business world is not in a position to tell us if we should, or that the technologists with respect to efficiency being the highest regard. I'm here in praise of inefficiency.
Because I think this is always going to be the point, right? I mean, whether you can think about lesser AI or simple AI, was the general AI?
Narrow in general.
Narrow in general. I mean, you can think about that, but I mean, all the point is, whatever AI you produce, it's going to have a set of principles, guidelines. That it's going for, right? So, for example, it's like you're thinking about trying to make things better. Well, who defines better, right? I mean, we're the ones that define better. You can't really program a machine for better. It's always going to have a set of principles that it's equating. The issue, I would really be, like you were talking about with the morality, you were talking about moral principles. I would be really afraid of trying to give a machine moral principles, because machines deal with, right? Machines calculate. Even though part of AI is it's supposed to learn, but it's really, like you're saying, it's really just through iterative processes trying to get closer to some goal that it has, right? I mean, it's always going to be that kind of a thing.
And Jonathan, if I could just interject, would you? I've already interrupted you.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Self-driving cars, which is one of the use of AI, imagine the possibility of an imminent collision. And the self-driving car has to make the decision of, do I collide with this object or that object? And if it's this object, 2 people die. And if it's this object, 7 people die. We are on the threshold of asking our artificially intelligent devices to make moral choices.
No.
I don't.
I
don't. To interrupt the interruption.
Go ahead.
That's a logical choice.
Right.
2 versus 1. I don't think that we're because in some ways we're not as far along as we like to scare ourselves. We're not as far along as I like to scare myself sometimes.
Right.
But we're really further along than we think.
Right.
And so I think imbuing a moral principle on the machine is we're because when we say something like that, I think we're giving it a human context that is not available yet.
It doesn't.
I still think it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the dangers we have of trying to say, and I really don't like the terminology in artificial intelligence, because it has no intelligence, right? There's no thinking. It's processing. It's always just comes down to
Well,
processing
we still have
information.
problem defining intelligence as
And
what
that's
it
the
means
thing.
and how
I mean,
we do it.
What a computer does and what an animal or a human does are very, very different things. They're not in the same world. I mean, we operate from from an awareness, whereas a machine will never operate from an awareness. I know that's part of science fiction, right? Like science fiction is, okay, this thing's going to become alive, and it's like we're not any closer to that than we've ever been in history, right? Like we're not an inch closer to that, right? We're building them, we're not building towards awareness. It's just not there. But
we're trying to mimic it like crazy.
We're trying to mimic it, right? We're trying to mimic it. We're trying to imitate what a human would do as an aware thing, but that doesn't make something aware. It's not going to all of a sudden just become aware because we mimic awareness, right?
What is awareness?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
What would be a sufficient test for you to determine it's aware? What would be the sufficient
Like the
test?
mirror test for AI?
So not Turing, that's not what I'm saying. Like, so I'm convinced you're aware,
Right.
but I can only assume that because if I ask you, you say, yes, I'm aware, right?
Yes.
But
So I ask artificial intelligence, that's what I'm saying, so like, that's where it gets hard, right? Because where do we define that?
is your acceptance of his awareness a presumption upon your own?
Yes, it is.
Exactly.
It's an axiom that I live by, that I do believe that we are free, they're real agents, I don't think you're a mirage.
Right.
I think that I also have an axiom that
Yeah, so that's Descartes, right? Cogito ergo sum. I
Right.
think, therefore I am, and so I think, therefore I know that you are also.
yeah, so like that's basic. So that's one of the things I'm kind of trying to wrestle with personally is one of the most terrifying things I think of artificial intelligence for me is that so few people in the world, 7, 8 billion people, whatever,
8 billion, yeah.
are making these decisions practically unilaterally when compared to the 7 billion people, 8 billion people. When we talk about morality, I think that if we abstract the idea of morality, sometimes we put too much nuance on it, but really any if-then statement could be thought of as a morality decision from just a pure abstract idea. So if this, then this. If there's God, then we act this way. Something like this. So any
But that's the thing. I think that's what makes morality. It's not an if-then statement. Moral principles. If you're acting in a moral way or an ethical way, it's not a situation where I have a rule that says if I do this, I do that. That's not morality. Morality is actually having to weigh the decisions and weigh whether or not. I mean, that's pragmatism.
That's just a larger graph, right?
Right. I mean,
I would just say, well, morality is complex, but complex in the magnitude of inputs that go into it. But it's still the
Well,
this,
so-
and this, and this, and this.
I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that you never can get down to a point where, I think at some point that becomes pragmatism, right? You're just being pragmatist. You're doing what you think you're supposed to do based on a bunch of rules, and I don't think that that's necessarily morality.
Nathaniel?
I don't think it's.
I think Nathaniel, you had something
I'm
to say.
curious to insert, sort of dovetail this conversation about consciousness or awareness into this question, or to deepen the conversation, because I think if let's say you give permission to this idea that, for example, artificial intelligence is sentient, or let's say a human-created system could become sentient, then the question is, will it take on the philosophy that it has inherited, or will it do something else? So, for example, will it take, like Martin Buber's great axiom, like of I thou, or will it take I it, right? This relationship between things in the world, right, which is a question of exploitation versus care, or a question of looking at, someone across from you and saying, I see you for, like, you being a thou, right, not an it, not an object to be exploited, right? So then, is it going to inherit our ideas and be able to distinguish qualitatively which ones
or have
Are
its
you
own
still-
revelation. If it's at that
Yeah.
level,
Yes,
will it have its own
exactly.
revelational experience and go beyond what we could even comprehend? in
Yeah,
our-
there's a great movie that kind of touches this. It's called Her. It's a very beautiful kind of pondering on the singularity, and that it actually, what happens. I don't want to spoil it, but you can watch it if you're curious. It's a great movie. But
Well, let's not get into the
But,
movie.
well, I mean, this is the thing. I think, I mean, if we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, we can think of this science fiction world in which artificial intelligence can become aware, or we can actually think in real terms in which we understand that this is not what's going on. This is not where we're moving towards. It's like there's not a situation. I mean, maybe you could dream up something. There's not a situation that something could actually, you know, an inanimate object could actually become aware, right? I mean, that's simply not reality. It's just more of a fantasy.
We don't, well, I'll say that we don't know that we don't believe it can happen. We don't know that it can't.
Well,
that's the
I think
the problem of the singularity. That's like-
In some ways, I don't know if y'all want us to dial it back a little bit. I mean, you know, that's okay if you don't, because it's, but we did have a question from the audience. I don't mean to cut you off, Jonathan.
I just, although, like, I'm comfortable believing that God gave humans a soul and he figured it out. AI will get to the point that a lot of people are going to think that it's got a soul, whether or not, because the language models are good enough now that they can have a discussion of theology. They can have a discussion on politics with nuance, with changing ideas over time. So I'm trying to figure out what is unique enough about humans that we can point to say this is an indicator that this has a soul and this machine does not.
and if I could simplify that, what makes us human? Would that be okay to? And I think that really is, for me, the core of the whole question of artificial intelligence is what makes us human. And it's possible that we're creating something that will not be human. We may, as I don't know why we have this, you know, desire to be God. I guess it's in our blood, so to speak, made in the image of. But we are trying, it seems like we're bound and determined to create the image of. And so as we look into that, and I think it comes back to, we need to ask the question, what is our relationship going to be with machines? The human-machine interaction, the human-machine relationship. Because if we continue down this track and we push to create something so much like us, but not there, you know, because we can't even define what makes us human, really. But I agree with you about the soul, but really being able to encapsulate that. And so I think that's part of where we're at right now. And, you know, Ray told me about, it came out, 3 p.m. today, Eastern Time, from, what was it, the Post? New York
Times.
New York Times, where Musk and, 1,000 something, or others. Well, you go ahead and talk.
Well, just the quick headline, this story, my New York Times app, this was 3 o'clock today. You talk about timely. Elon Musk and others call for pause on AI, citing profound risks to society. And then the subheadline, more than 1,000 tech leaders, researchers, and others signed an open letter urging a moratorium on the development of the most powerful AI systems. So, New York Times today.
So if the guy who's thinking about plugging us into machines, the Neuralink, is saying time out, like let's take a break on this first, you know, I mean, if that's the guy saying this, maybe we ought to listen a little bit. Maybe this headlong push in towards. Anyway, yes. Nathan,
I think-
sounds like you.
Well, no, I think we're
go first.
close to this conversation with
Right.
Neuralink, and for example, Google Glass was investing in these ideas a while back, but it's basically, I think the main discussion now is about augmenting. It's not necessarily that you're not going to put the consciousness into the machine. Rather, you're going to put the machine into the organism, and it's going to augment your operations, right, in some manner. So that's as far as I understand where the discourse is on that, and actually what is being studied and developed.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm really skeptical of this very science fiction idea of we're going to have this thing become aware, because that to me is not where the challenge is. I think the challenge is things like this, where we're actually starting to integrate human awareness and human consciousness into machine technology. And where is it that we begin to that autonomy question you were talking about, where do we lose control? Like where does it become more controlling now that it actually has some awareness and consciousness thing?
Can I drop a movie title now?
Yeah.
Altered Carbon.
Yeah, there you
Right.
go.
Altered Carbon,
So
yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Altered Carbon, but it's essentially that. And I'm not sure if it was, I hate to keep plugging Musk, but he might have been the one that said, and he's not my hero, so although
Yeah.
he said it's going to be easier to make a human a cyborg than to create a machine that is human, something like that. I paraphrase poorly, but essentially that point. Question?
So, because right now science cannot answer the question, what is consciousness? So if we can't answer that question, there's no way we can imbue a machine with something that we don't understand. And so we have to be very careful to remember in this conversation the idea of our humility. Because the problem, and I think maybe it was Jonathan that said it, we are not God. We're not meant to be God. We were deceived early on by, hey, let's let you think like God and be like God, and many troubles roll from that. And so to keep this a little more of a humble conversation, and I think you all are trying to do that. There are some limits to what can be done, and hopefully some people are going, maybe we should slow this down a little bit.
Well, in that vein, if y'all don't mind, and I know that some of y'all have some questions, but let's roll it back to the idea of faith a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about, and Ray, you actually had pondered this or brought this question up. What about prayer? And let me just, how do you think AI will change the way we pray? Now, you brought up Facebook already, and that's changed because now we put it out there and we have support. But what are you thinking?
Oh, I think it's a powerful human tendency to want to work out prayer, to systematize it. And I think that's part and parcel of the human temptation. So for
Would you say systematize it?
Systematize.
Find a formula that works so my prayers.
let me give you two examples of systematizing prayer. The first we get from the Hindu faith, in which you write your prayer on a wheel, and then you turn the crank, and every time that the paper comes to the top of the wheel, your prayer has gone to the gods. So Hindus regularly pray using a mechanistic approach called a prayer wheel. Yeah. You can look on YouTube. There's actually a picture of Gandhi praying, turning the prayer wheel, which is great because it takes me out of the loop. I turn the crank, the prayer goes up to heaven. Now, and you're thinking, well, that's just silly. But the truth is that haven't we all, if you're a part of a regular faith community, haven't we all gotten emails that say, if enough of us will pray and band together, we can change history, as though we would force God. As though we would force God. So with respect to AI and prayer, I think that part and parcel of what we want to do in our heart of hearts is to control the system, to understand the system. Can we live with the ambiguity of prayers that are supposedly not answered or answered? Can we live in the tension of I'm heard, I'm not heard? Or it used to be when I'd look at the night sky in the silence, I just figured that God wasn't there. And now, in the silence, God is all I hear. And I tell you, I'm a lot happier the second way than the first way. So with respect to AI and prayer, I think that the degree which we can control the prayer environment, this is our powerful urge, to the degree we can control the prayer environment by having our devices do our praying for us or our devices responding to us, we're going to feel as though we are more significant. And I think we're going to miss the mystery. The theological word here is the numinous, the mystery of what it takes to be with the Creator. And 10 seconds, I want to circle back, Gabby, when you asked about uploading human consciousness. Novel, James Dashner, The Eye of the Mind. You should read that because it talks about uploading and downloading human consciousness. I know you're thinking you've kind of poo-pooed science fiction 2 or 3 times.
No, it's
I'm like, no, those are the seers. They're the prophets.
Yeah, I'm not saying, that's the thing, I'm not to poo-poo science fiction, I'm just thinking there's certain things that science fiction does, and I think that's the whole idea of this idea of the aware machine. It's like science fiction people do this, but this isn't really the direction we're going. I think the direction we're going is more in the point of like augmentation and kind of those kind of things.
Well,
Right, or those kind of things, but yeah, and so that's one of the reasons. I'm not trying to. I do think there's some science fiction that really ends up getting the thing. I think I'm really more interested in let's look at where we're actually going and think about those kind of things as opposed to
more
sort of
practical approach
more
as opposed to a
practical
sort of
approach rather than
futuristic.
going, we got this future that
And-
that doesn't really.
And let me ask you a question, but first, Ray, we're so addicted to the ringtone. Wouldn't it be nice when you prayed if you got like a ringtone? It's like a text back that said, gotcha, or I heard you. I heard
That's
you.
actually-
Or like
That's
if you
actually-
receive money on Venmo, you get the cash register sound like cha-ching.
There's actually programs that are designed like that in beta mode now that are basically meditation applications. So
Absolutely.
they monitor your theta and alpha waves in your brain and basically and can give you like sort of neural feedback. So like, oh, now you're in the zone, you're focused, or and you can get like musical or auditory basically feedback telling you you're doing great, keep it up, or like actually you're falling out, you're not focused, like you're not in the zone, or you're not like praying enough, or
So a guru of sort, an AI
it's
guru.
it's a guide, essentially monitoring your inner state, telling you if you're really praying or not, meditating, if you will, if you want to be more broad. Essentially, when we pray, there are parts of our brain, that release certain hormones that make us feel good because we are essentially giving up power in a way to some higher system or some higher
How do you
order.
feel about that, though? I mean, because part of the prayer experience, and meditation is the practice thereof, and to master yourself and yes, having a guru that guides you through that is important, but it still comes back to the practitioner, still comes back to the individual to do that. So I don't know. I mean,
I
on
think
one
it's a
hand, I can
question
see
of-
how helpful it could
I
be.
think it's just a question of discipline because, for example, some people who suffer a lot from attention or neurodivergence of some kind, or even depression, manic depression, and so on. These could be incredible tools for these people who are suffering to be able to like keep migraines from rocking their world, or things like that. So in a way, they can be tools that augment our ability to be present and in the moment. The question is also the other end of the paradigm is exploitation. So is it augmenting or is it exploiting what it makes us human, what makes us
So we could get
present.
we could get it ad free if we subscribe to, so it doesn't
Yeah,
interrupt us
exactly.
halfway through our
Exactly.
meditation.
Yeah, so
brought to you by.
Jaron Lanier writes a lot about this in Who Owns the Future. It's a great book. It's very short, but it's an incredible book about the pitfalls of this phenomenon. So, like, Who Owns the Future is basically, it basically tells us that there are siren servers, essentially, servers that are master servers that control the flow of information, all information that runs through computation systems. And that means also your data, your personal data, etc. And that stuff can be bought and sold, and so on. And so essentially, in this book, he tries to sort of point out that this is the thing we should be concerned about most, is who owns that information.
Well, that goes back
And
to
do
Jonathan's
you
point.
own it? Do you own your own prayers, right? Or does someone else, right? Right, so to bring it back to this question of prayer, is this something that came from me? Or is it, like you said, in my heart of heart, has it been divinely inspired? Or is it just something I borrowed from an app that told me how to feel or how to think, or something like that. So,
Jonathan?
yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's coming up and with all of this is this sort of consumerization of us as humans, right? I mean, like, a lot of AI has been used to sort of make us consumers, and like you were talking about prayer, the thing that came to my mind about that is like, you're praying and then you look at your Facebook app and there's an ad for the thing you were praying for, right? It's like, there you go, right? And
Your prayer's been answered. It only costs $19.99.
Yeah, $19.99, exactly. And how much is it, right? That this idea, because I mean, like, we talk about this idea. I was just talking about in class. It's what one of the themes in theology over the last few years has been the prosperity gospel, right? And then so the idea of the prosperity gospel is basically that it's that God will supply your needs, but your needs are notoriously materialistic, right? Like, your needs are for the things of the world and not spiritual in nature, right? And so this is kind of where we are encountering AI the most, although it may not be that in the future, has been really with a lot of this get your needs met kind of stuff, and so I think there's a consumerization of this kind of thing.
And the thing that we don't even really get our head around is it's just about our attention too. Where our attention is, I mean, we can, if you want to look at it as serving two gods or two masters rather, where our attention is, that is where that's our focus, that's where our, go ahead.
Yeah,
Help me out.
I would just say, well, attention is one side of the coin, but the other side is retention,
Yeah.
And so, yes, we have this ability to be attentive and to be aware and to focus on something, but do we actually retain the thing that we are present with, or that take time to be with, or is it just something we consume in a moment and move on, right? So I think that
So when you say retain, is it almost like imbuing that with making it part of us? Are we really wanting it just as a momentary gratification, or is it really worth our sense of making it part of us?
Right, it's the difference between knowing and wisdom, or like knowledge and wisdom, right? This discourse, or this, wisdom is really the experience of being there, right? And knowing something, but in a more, in a deeper sense. So I think when I think about, AI potentially helping us to pray better, you're right? It could be that if, let's say, it is a tool that can be mastered and to be understood, can it give us this, can it allow us the space to really be there in a moment, and to have some kind of, like you said, revelation or some kind of divine inspiration, or not?
As a
right?
tool.
As a tool.
Yeah, but Nathaniel, where I think I might split hairs with you or part ways a little bit is that I'm all in favor of meditation. I think it's real and I think it's valuable. And I think it's for people of faith or not people of faith. Okay? But for me, the difference is, and you mentioned the difference between knowledge and wisdom. The Hebrews, who gave us the Old Testament, one primary definition of the word wisdom is they actually use an idiom. They use an idiom. Wisdom is a hearing heart, which presumes a speaker, as opposed to knowledge, which can be gained, manipulated, and formed and fashioned and marketed and caused to be efficient. So there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. The Hebrews would say that wisdom is a hearing heart, but a hearing heart presumes a speaker. And this is where then I would say there's a difference between meditation, which is learning to tune the instrument, and I'm in favor of learning to tune the instrument. So I'm not afraid of meditation. But I would say meditation is not prayer, because I'm just medieval enough to think there's someone up there.
Y'all want to take a question from the audience?
Sure, yeah.
How we doing on time? I don't even have mine.
Oh, it's 9:30.
Oh, well,
7:20. It's 7:20.
we've got some snacks, so we can make it another couple.
It's 7:20 right now.
Let's have, Sebastian, you had, and then we'll get to you.
So there's, like, in the beginning, Dr. May addressed the idea of there being, you talked about the skepticism and the balance of the skepticism and religion and the news and science and
Yeah.
everything. And then we heard Dr. Hollenbach talk about this sense of gratification when response is instant and when we feel fulfilled, especially when it's quick. As humans, I want to ask just what is the general thought or general idea of AI influencing that gratification sense with that skepticism sense of man. Now, adding to that is there's the idea that was also presented of religion becoming more individual or becoming something more groupal, like or staying a group. What is the thought of of AI influencing on each person's way of transforming religion into what's become nowadays? Do we think
Tell him, John.
that AI is going to be pushing towards that individual sense of religion, or do we think it's going to bring us back to that group
What-
side of it?
There's a couple possibilities. I mean, it could do, like you said, potentially it could do both. I mean, one of the things that we see is that, AI has been used to cater to our needs, right? So, one of the deals that's really been happening in religion in the 21st century is people are seeking their own way, right? Their own religious path. And so AI could do a couple of things. One, it could give you your path that you want, or it could connect you with people who have similar paths. Because like one of the things we're seeing with Facebook and social media and everything is this connecting of people who are a little bit who have rare interests, right? They have
We
an
can go
interest in-
crazy together.
you can, yes, you can all have your own, so we could have the online cult. And I think even the point to where you could have an AI that becomes your own cult leader, I guess. Because if you're not there enough to realize that it's, if you're looking at it at a distance remotely, and I think it comes back to what you were saying about how do you know whether it's, it looks like it looks like it's aware, or it seems like it's aware, and at a distance, your social media feeds look like they're coming from real people. And so, the idea of having a AI guru, a virtual guru, or a virtual cult leader, right? It could be reality, right? I don't know, that's my thought on the subject.
Yeah, artificial psychopath. Absolutely.
I think that to connect that personalization piece of it. Now, I will say that we all have our personal beliefs, and to the degree that they match a belief system that we are participating in, outwardly or completely, I think that we all approach faith in our own way, or at least most people, or I would hope that people find God in a way that makes sense to them. And if they do that through their traditional faith, or but when we think about going back to the idea of personalization,
Yeah.
and that's what's driving all of so much of where we're at today is the personalization.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can be, everything can be customized for you. Everything can be customized, exactly tailored to fit your needs and your wants and your desires. And I think that in general, where that leads us is that everything is instantaneous. Everything is about me. Everything has to do with what makes me feel comfortable and what makes me feel good. I think that the danger there is that we get so I guess egocentric, narcissistic. I'm not sure what the right word is. There's where's the psychologist in the room? We so focus on ourselves that we forget that that the biggest part of us is sharing with others, is sharing life with others, service to others. Really, if you want to get it to that point, but. The marketing is so pervasive in what we do. It's hard for me not to be too cynical about the drive for personalization, although I sort of get it, and actually do think that it's personally we need to find what makes sense to us. On the other hand, are we just being driven by the desire to be comfortable? Did y'all
just
want to add
wanted to
something?
dovetail a little bit with that, because I think it has to do with attention and retention conversation a little. Because if, for example, this tool, or however it appears in the near future, is telling you how and what to do, right? Or to go about your life. Okay, now I have an appointment, now I do this, now I do that, right? Everything is programmed. That's essentially a ritual of hours. I mean, if you think about the liturgy of the hours, for example, in the Catholic tradition, but even other traditions have rituals that are based on a certain kind of rhythm throughout the day that are sort of designed to sort of elevate your spiritual self. That's the idea, at least. But if this ritual of hours is constantly changing and constantly customizable to your, let's say, your metabolism or your endocrine system or your hormones, right? Like, et cetera, like down the line, which is not so far off, actually. Then, like, for example, because you can monitor your insulin, you know, you can monitor your heart rate. All these things they're being done, right? And there are programs that can tell you, oh, time to calm down, or time to find time to find a quiet space, you know, because you're being triggered or whatever. So this is already stuff that exists, that's being used medicinally for people who suffer from certain, you know, disorders. So then I guess the question I'm interested in with the faith question or a prayer is like, if, for example, there is an artificial intelligence which is, let's say, narrow, that is sort of widely accepted, would it be safe to say that that might be useful to us to create a kind of routine in a human being that is optimal, but also spiritually helpful, right? To make us more friendly with each other, potentially, or with other species, right? Like, can it elevate our consciousness? That's my question.
Did you have and then I'll get back to you on that. What
My question is, well, I think of myself as an optimistic skeptic. So I'm not sure that anybody's telling me the truth, but I want to believe that somebody is.
you mean on the panel?
Yes.
Or
In the world.
Yeah.
I feel like we all sort of feel that way. I don't know anybody who just believes everything. So why do we keep doing it? That's my question for the theologian and for the social, why do we keep doing it?
What do you mean?
If we're pretty sure that most of it's not true.
Why do we keep believing it?
embracing the lies?
Dark mirror.
Right.
Because we're getting the dopamine hits.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how to please ourselves, and we have for a long time. It's called sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean, we don't need technology to drop acid and to
And
get
tiny video games.
and tiny video games, which was the start, right? Because it gives us a dopamine hit, and we don't know why we're doing it. We just know it feels good. So now that's me way out of my field, Tracy, because I just gave you a physiological answer, and I think it says theologian on my door. But I did want to both try to answer you and then also reflect a little bit on what Nathaniel said. I'm in favor of centering the mechanism. I think as best I can understand it, Nathaniel, what you're really talking about is transcendental meditation, which has helped an awful lot of people, especially neurodivergent people. So I'm certainly in favor of that. But our whole conversation, and I'm from Chicago, I'm a Westerner, I'm a white male baby boomer. You don't get any more Western than that. But our whole conversation has been very Western. And I would like to suggest that there are plenty of other cultures around the world that believe in the wisdom of the collective. And maybe Dr. Jeffries, to split hairs with you a little bit, it's like, no, there's plenty of people who don't want, around the world, of that 8 billion, who do not want to fine-tune their religion personally. They want to make sure that they're in the center of an orthodoxy, whether it's an orthodoxy received by tribal elders or in East Asian cultures by your ancestors, or even in Christianity, especially among the Orthodox branches, to where the more personal it is, the more likely it is to contain ancient heresies. I don't know that we're inventing any new heresies, but I do know that our orthodoxy can keep us on, and here I am, I'm really going to sound like a preacher now, in favor of the straight and narrow. And I just think it's very, very Western for us to want to fine-tune our own personal religion.
I'll let Jonathan go.
Well, the thing that you're sort of getting at is that, I know some people call this sort of that postmodern shift, is that, you know, one of the things that I feel uncomfortable with regard to sort of AI and this personalization and all this kind of thing is this quest for truth. You know, to me, in religious truth or as a social scientist, it's like I'm not interested in reifying what I already believe, right? I don't want to. I want to find what's true, right? And like you said, it's like if Christianity is true, like I'm not gonna I'm gonna accept the truth, right? Or if a belief system is true, I want to find out it's true. And the problem with things that feed us what we want or what we want to hear is they never make us critique, am I really looking for the truth? Is it true? Right? And I think, like you said, the skepticism's there, but what else do we have? Like, it's kind of, what else do we have? You know, where else are you going to get your news? Right? If you really want to find out the world, you got to trust somebody. And I don't trust any of them, but I got to trust one of them, or I'm just going to be in the dark.
But shouldn't we discern about those things? Shouldn't we have some discernment about the things that we believe we need, that we crave, if you will, the things that we believe? Okay, maybe we don't believe in them necessarily, but we can't not do it.
I think what
and that's
Ray
the danger of it.
I think what Ray was getting at is the fact that I think that community, or that the numbers, the tradition and the community gives us a little more security that,
Right.
you know, to find that.
And that's certainly pragmatic, that it gives us security. But I'd like to suggest that there's also a chance at transcendence.
Yeah.
And I find it curious that in our culture, it's noble to be a seeker of the truth, but it's presumptuous to say that we have found the truth. Anybody see some cognitive dissonance there?
Yeah, I think there's also a conversation about like being with, you know, like, because you know, the problem of the customizable playlist, if you will, is that you're sort of alone in a way. You're sort of like, it's never like anyone else's taste is kind of like not quite your taste. But like when you go, for example, to church or to some other form of ritual that requires you to be with others that maybe have different opinions than you do. Yeah, but you're just like, let's just come together despite our differences and stand or sit together in silence. Yeah. And let's be with each other despite our differences and giving space to, okay, yeah, I know you have your customizable playlist, but when we come here, it's not about that, right?
I mean, people still go to rock concerts, which is fascinating, right? Because the music is worse, and I mean, to some extent, the experience, it's the reason that you're doing it together, right? Like,
Yeah.
And it's the difference between loneliness and solitude, because if you're lonely, you don't know how to be with others. But when you practice solitude, when you choose to then go and be with others, you are full of grace. You're full of space for the others.
Well said.
To be them.
I really like
themselves.
that. Yeah. By the way, fun fact, you can Google, and maybe you can speak to this. You can Google the word Sheilaism,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah, Robert Bella.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert Bella argued that we are getting to a point to where everybody's going to have their own religion, and he talks about this one person he interviewed, and she called it Sheilaism.
Because her name was
Sheila, right? She said, this is what I believe, and it's Sheilaism, and that's sort of...
And it's a thing. I mean,
it's
so Bella's
definitely
written about
a
it,
thing.
but you can just even Google it now, and it's
Yeah.
like, you know, it's perfectly for me.
Well, let's continue on this idea of the social aspects of faith and how AI might influence or impact that. What do you think perhaps the elements or the parts of that, the social, societal components of religion are going to be affected? For instance, religion helps us in some ways control behavior, if you will, because of morality, what we should and shouldn't do. How do y'all think that AI might, and Jonathan, this might be a little more in your wheelhouse, but how do you think that, I mean, even congregation, y'all were just saying, and I agree with completely, that the human experience we reach out for companion, for others to be present with.
I mean, and I think that you kind of spoke to it a minute ago, that the thing of, can we get the hit, can we get the feel that others are around us without others actually being around us? And if that's the case, then sort of these, like you were kind of where you're getting like accountability, right? That part of what helps us to maintain our morality is the fact that we're a part of a community that holds us accountable, that requires something of us. In fact, there's always been sort of the hypothesis out there that so far has sort of proved to be true, is that what we call the strictness hypothesis, the idea that religious organizations that demand something of their members as far as morality and living a certain lifestyle generally are the ones that maintain their members and grow. And those that sort of, you can believe anything you want, you kind of live your own life and just kind of be a good person, generally decline. Regardless of what their other orientations are. And there is a sense in which people want somebody to hold them morally accountable. They have a hard time being moral on their own, right?
That's right.
And to your point on the social side of AI, with respect to whatever the religious implications are, I think we just need to look forward for about another 5 years. There's my prediction. I'm the stupidest man in the room to quantify that prediction. And we're going to see AI that is developed in East Asia being very different from AI that's developed in Western democracies. And it's not because there's this boogeyman of a collective governmental style, but that East Asian thought, whether that's going to be Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, and I specify them because they lean into the high tech, right? We're going to see that East Asian AI is going to be of a different taste and feel of Western AI, and with the emergence now of South Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent, that they're going to be coming along pretty quick with their own versions of AI, and it's going to have yet another feel. And basically what I'm talking about is Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judeo-Christian. So I'm basically saying they're going to be very different flavors.
I agree.
I think that this also brings the question of sustainability into the fold, because I ponder also, science fiction. That's my brain, right? That also, if AI is allowed to develop to the point that I think it's going to be, it's also, if it's going to be exploitative, then we're going to have problems. It's going to continue on this paradigm. If it's going to be something that goes toward more sustainable or more harmonious world, then I think it will be a tool that would augment some kind of very good thing for us, not just humans, but all species on this planet. And so perhaps they would tell you, okay, for, if, for example, it is augmenting our lives in some way, that, for example, okay, it's been decided that we should shut down all of our, electronics for, 8 hours, and that actually that's the most efficient thing, and, lights out, now just be with other organisms and humans, and don't use your devices, or right? Could there be some kind of, basically an autonomous system that decides what's the most efficient use of all of our electronics, or what?
Because basically humans can't be trusted to do the right thing, or do the right thing for themselves. And so we need a control structure.
Yeah, I mean, there's
is
a system of
omnipotent,
rules.
omniscient, all the omnis, omni plus, And so instead of us being God to create another human, we're
create our own God?
Create our own God. And I think that several people much more intelligent than I have said, be careful the gods you create. In fact, I think
Right.
the atheists might have said that, but for good reason, I would
But
see
it's a question of the rules, right? So if you have rules, if you have laws, who decides what are the good laws and which are sort of obsolete?
Yeah,
I think those
I
are-
love the image, Nathaniel, because I'd like to suggest that in the warp and woof of the creation, that we have rolling blackouts. They're called day and night. And it's only
And
been
it's a very good
since
thing for your body.
Yes,
Yeah, and your mind.
I mean, let's
to
get into
be in
circadian
darkness
rhythms and all of that. And by the way, those rolling blackouts were operative in human experience for millennia, until that guy Edison ruined everything. Right now, but my point is that yet another example, electricity, of how technology has now impacted human behavior. So
Fear of the dark.
Yeah, and maybe to John's point about efficiencies, and you just mentioned that if AI can say this is the most efficient way is to unplug for 8 hours. I love it. Anne Lamott says everything works better if you unplug it for a little while and then plug it back in. And of course, she's speaking metaphorically in that.
One thing I wanted to bring up when you were talking about how East Asia AI is going to be a different development, creation, progression. And I may have the name wrong. I may be thinking about the Johnny Carson sketch, but I think there's a temple already with an AI robot called, I think the name is Mindar, who I guess proceeds over that particular temple and the rituals within that temple. So they're not nearly like us in terms of their, at least it seems that they don't have this reluctance to embrace technology, maybe and let it just be so much a part of their lives. And part of that's their ideology, their religious belief, their belief systems as well there too. We're getting pretty close. There was one more question, and then we'll do some closing arguments, or not arguments, sorry, some closing statements, if we will. What do you have?
Well, history shows that we have. Basically, history kind of has shown that just when we create technologies to replace or to deal with labor, we end up finding more things to do. I mean, most of us have huge amounts of labor-saving device in our lives, but we're pretty busy people, right? We recently, been through labor shortages, right, in the United States. It's like people, 50 years ago who were looking at the future and saying, oh, robots are going to take over the world, or computers are going to do this, or, automated systems in factories, which we have all the time, and we have very few factory workers, and we still have jobs for everybody, right? I mean, the history is solid. The other thing that's going right now is we're in the midst of basically population decline. I mean, if it wasn't for immigration, the United States would be in population decline. Our total fertility rate's 1.6. Meaning we're well below being able to replace our own population. People are talking about this maybe being, oh no, is it happening too fast? I don't know that we're necessarily going to need to meet, as many needs as we have. I'm always a little bit skeptical just because of history, that when people go, oh yeah, we're going to put all these people out of business with this kind of stuff. Well, we'll come up with other things for them to do. I mean, it just seems to be kind of the way what was the other part I'm trying to?
So again, we talk a lot about the value share lists, things like that's kind of what you're floating around that idea. So like one of the things I'm wondering is like it seems to me that like there's like this Protestant ethos of industry and giving value and all these things. So if people do start to lose their jobs or maybe go to a different job because of whatever, maybe they don't feel much value in the industry, what does the church? Does the church then, because I think that in America especially, we see this big confrontation between gospel only, social gospel, they try to create a dichotomy.
Right.
I don't think there is one, but whatever. So like, what is the church going to do? So we're talking about faith. What is the church going to do to try to mend that rift that may not even happen?
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we seem to be, the church seems to be right now at odds with itself. I think you're right. I think there's this definite divergence in the church between, like you said, right belief and, we're going to, and political action kind of sides going in directions. So I don't know where the church is going right now. One of the things I do see is that people in Christianity are being less institutional, right? And so the big institutions, particularly denominations, are really on the decline. I think congregations are doing pretty well, right? Churches are doing well. Denominations, labels, organizations, bigger organizations are not really doing so well. So I don't know really where the church is going organizationally. So I think that's the first question to ask, is where we're going.
Well, coming from Brazil, a poor country compared to USA, of course, I think that to some extent I can help you to think in terms of where the church will be. In Brazil, because of technology, many people lose their jobs every single day. And one thing that churches do, especially evangelical churches, is actually to create partnership with local governments to help the members of the church or the local communities to learn new skills to engage once again in the workforce. So this is not a reality that I see here in USA.
Right.
I don't see that in USA. When I look at the American church, what I see is pretty much the American church helping and serving the local community, but not to the extent of helping them to grow and mature as a person. We focus more on the spiritual aspect of the person, and we completely neglect the other part of the person. And when we give something to someone who is in need, we think that we are doing the gospel. And so I think this is a mistake. Okay? I'm in pro of the social gospel, if you will. I'm not right there with liberation theology, and not even the prosperity theology, if you will. But I'm just saying that the church needs to think a little bit more about the role that the church will be playing in the nearby future, especially here in North America.
Yeah, that conversation comes up in the book Automatic Society by Bernard Stiegler. Basically, the thesis is that when things become automated, you reinvest in human skills, in human crafts that cannot be automated. So that and that is a policy as well on a governmental and economic level. You say, look at this incredible wealth we have created through automation. Let's take the surplus wealth and reinvest it in humanity to create a more just and more prosperous world where humans aren't just sitting around feeling meaningless or feeling like they don't have something to do with their hands. Which
They
is
do. They have a smartphone. Well,
But
maybe
just-
not in a.
But just being busy, right? But that, not just keeping busy, but actually doing something that feeds your soul,
Right.
makes you feel like you have meaning.
And I think that that point is it should be really the aligned with how AI how can we serve others, number one, to help them be I don't want to say productive, but have that sense of purpose, find that purpose, be intentional about their purpose, as well as the meaning that comes with that, whether it's through art or through just creating something, building. But one of the things that we're going to have to struggle with is the benefits of AI. Because the benefits of AI, as structured now, go completely to the owners of the AI. How that is distributed to help others, to even for purposes of just becoming a well and healthy person. If you can afford it, it can help you. And so that's one of the things that I want to point out is that we're just finding out how beautiful and powerful this thing can be. If we don't harness, if we don't allow everyone to partake of that, then it's just going to be back to your power and control paradigm. It's just going to continue with that. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind. And I want to, I have a feeling we could take a break and go on, maybe not, but I want us to go ahead and take the opportunity for some closing statements and yeah. Let's only for time's sake. And if y'all want to stick around and we can have further discussions, I would be happy to. I don't know about the rest of the panel, but how about some closing statements just to give us a sense of closure.
So, Dr. Jeffries, did I just hear a business professor warn us against laissez-faire capitalism?
You'd be surprised some of the thoughts that come through my mind.
That's good, not bad. Closing thoughts. Gosh, thank you all for being here. I wish everybody had the microphone. I'd like to say this, the last 20 years have been mind-blowing. I'm 67. I could not have imagined the world that we live in now. I could not have imagined it when I was 30. Much less as a child. We've mapped the human genome. We have the ability to calculate the simple dividing, the Babbage adding and subtracting machines do things that are absolutely breathtaking. And I think that the promise of AI, as you've described as absolutely beautiful, is that we're already seeing AI be able to help diagnose medical conditions and come up with, at the level of gene splicing, direct us in ways that could do incredible good. And at the same time, I think I would share your caution after having teased you that in the hands of the few, that some of the possibilities of AI for me are absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
So this is the human condition, capable of incredible good and capable of horrific evil. And if I could, my final thing would be just read Genesis 1 and 2 and then read Genesis 3 and 4. And you've got the goodness of creation and the purity of God's intention. And then when left in the hands of men and women such as us, we read Genesis 3 and 4, and which we get all of the seeds of evil. So AI is filled with promise. The roller coaster's going faster than I can imagine, but I've always been a chicken and I've never liked roller coasters. So maybe I should just learn to live with it.
Yeah, I kind of share this idea that basically the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think really many of the issues that we are dealing with AI are really just extensions of the same issues we've been dealing with for a long period of time. They're ownership and control, right? It's like, so we have a sort of a capitalist system, but then if you look at, well, what's the alternative? You still end up with someone has control. Someone makes the decisions, right? Who's making the decisions, right? Right now, decisions are made based on a profit motive. Like where's the money going to come from to fund the technology, right? And so the technology is based on where the money comes from, which tends to go towards consumerism, right? Yeah. Or it tends to go towards, like you said, exploitation, right? There's ways in which, you can get people to pay money and use this to help us, not help the people that are using it, right? And so, you're still back. I mean, this is the same thing we've been talking about, for a couple hundred years with the modernization, individualization, right? This process of everything catering to the individual, catering to the person, has sort of been the steady step that we've been on for the last couple of hundred years. And part of that comes into, so what happens with communities? What happens with how are we held together? This has been a sort of an issue we've been dealing with before AI. So I think a lot of these issues we're dealing with about AI, yes, because of, like you said, because of the potential for, particularly when we start thinking about, autonomous programs or autonomous system, or we start thinking about systems that integrate the human awareness and human abilities with machines, and like, okay, so do humans have the potential to lose control, or have the potential to get so aware of their capacities that they lose a sense of humility with that, right? Which humans do often, right? And so a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, these are just extensions of issues that we've been dealing with for a while now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my...
Yeah, I'll just maybe piggyback on both of your all's closing thoughts and say that, and also to kind of bring us back also to how you opened the conversation, which is about paradigms, right? That we are existing now, I think, in the coexistence of many paradigms that are running parallel to each other. And there's a paradigm of exploitation of the planet, and also of each other and of other species. There's a paradigm perhaps of harmony or care, and not one of productivity, right? Maybe a little bit more restrained, more contemplative perhaps, or sustainable, or whatever, however you say it. And then there's a number of other paradigms down the line. So I think that the question for me when I think about AI as a tool, or perhaps as a companion in this journey that we are on as human beings on this planet, is that how we use it, or how we understand it as either a gift or something that can be used for good, if you will, or for benefit of us or other species, or how it can be used simply to exploit or to create the most efficient way, for example, to extract minerals or to cut down a forest, which leaves nothing for other species, it leaves nothing for us as human beings, and creates basically chaos. So I think it's one of balance, right? It's perhaps a managed approach to economics that maybe, and government that maybe is not so popular, right? But I think, for example, AI, which is narrow AI, is essentially that. Narrow AI is a managed AI. It's got blinders like a horse, and you're telling it how to walk, where to be cautious, right? You can't ask, it won't answer some questions, right? If you ask it certain things, right, on Chat GPT for example, it won't tell you, the results of the 2020 election or whatever you want to, you know what I mean? So it's, so a managed view is perhaps the best view as we move forward with this discussion of AI. And then I also want to just say that to bring it more into the philosophical or even phenomenological discourse, that I think if it is something that could be used to augment our lives for the benefit of ourselves as a species, then I think it could potentially be an incredible tool for bringing us closer to each other, and not just being, always in conflict or always in disagreement or even reacting in violence towards others, constantly investing in warfare or exploitation. So I think that there's a potential with it that it could bring us together. I think it's possible.
I want to address it. I kind of want you in charge. Would you mind being that kind heart, that loving spirit? I'll vote for you. I want to address it in terms of present, near term, and long term. And at present, the one of the things that has been said, and I think it was Bostrom who said it or brought it out like this. So with AI development, who gets to make those decisions? Like, who gets to make the decisions about where we go, how it's programmed, how it's developed, and all of that? And then added on to that is the idea of why. Why do those people get to make those decisions? And I think that's really where that's what we have clear and present with us right now. It's all around us. It's part of our lives, and we depend on it in so many ways. But that dependency is also been created into an addiction, and for the ideas of exploitation and monetary gain. So I think that is something that we can talk about and need to talk about. Who gets to make the decisions and why? Is it really just about power and control? Near term is we're going to have robots very soon that are human-like. And that may seem a little bit too far-fetched for y'all. Okay, you're talking 20 years. I'm talking sooner. I'm talking within the next decade, we will have robots. And so my question then goes back to, what is the relationship between humans and machines? If they're being those machines are being created as tools to do menial automated tasks, and now to analyze and make decisions. I mean, it's still programming, it's still a tool. But when the more it starts looking like us, the more it starts mimicking us, the more that we are going to start thinking about it as not a tool and a machine. And so already there's talk about, so what about rights? What about rights for these tools that look like us? What about, and it's being created as a tool, but yet we can't help ourselves. We want to make it more like us. And to the point where it mimics us, and we want to give it the empathy and sympathy and compassion and all those human traits that we might just be mirroring on it. We might just be projecting, rather, on it. So that's the near term. We're going to have to come to terms with the relationship between humans and machine. We're creating them as a tool. Where does it cross the line? And finally, the last one is very far-fetched, so I'm going to take the science fiction, and Nathaniel, you may be the only one who appreciates this, but, and this is just for conversation. Don't get the tar and feathers out, but let me just, for conversation purposes, if all is a creation of God, and if God is directing humanity and has directed humanity, and here we are, part of that is the creation of this technology. Is it possible that that technology actually becomes a catalyst, dare I say, a second coming, for truly understanding who we are as humans, what makes us human, what makes us and gives us that connection to the divine? With that being said, I want to thank you as the audience for participating and giving us some wonderful questions. Thank you guys for being part of this, and really, we have to talk. We have to talk about it. We have to find the things that we have in common that we can drive this forward. So I just, and the folks online, thank you for being part of this. And my challenge is just to keep the conversation going, grow it. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great night.